Hey guys, tonight we slip away from the modern world and into the stone-cold silence of a medieval nunnery. The wind howls outside like it's carrying centuries of forgotten prayers. You're standing there in a long woolen gown, feet raw from the journey, with your life's possessions stuffed into a single linen sack. The stone walls stretch upward like judgment itself, and the wooden door creaks open with a sound that might haunt you for years. Welcome to your new home. Your father said this was a noble calling. Your mother wept quietly, which was more than she did at your sister's wedding. You're only 13, or 15, or maybe 18. No one keeps great records, but you're definitely young enough to still miss sweet milk and warm beds. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and the current time. I want to see who's falling asleep with the medieval sisters tonight. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first step inside is jarring. The air is heavy, wet with incense and something much more earthy. You're greeted not with warm smiles, but a nod from Sister Hildegard. She eyes your two clean shoes, and with a curt gesture, points you to a small bench. No words. You're not part of their world yet. The convent smells of wax, cold stone, and cabbage. Always cabbage. You wonder if you'll ever smell lavender again. They strip you of your name first. You were once Isabel, or Joan, or Marjorie. Now your sister marries something. You don't get to choose. The abbess does. You bow when she speaks, but she rarely does. And when she does, it sounds like she's speaking to God, not you. You hand over your sack. The veil they give you itches, and the robe you wear now, thick wool dyed in tired black, smells like it's been worn by 10 others before you, because it probably has. You're led to a tiny stone alcove. It's called a cell, but don't let the poetic name fool you. It's the size of a pantry. A straw mattress waits for you on a wooden frame, and you're lucky if it doesn't crawl. No candles tonight. You'll sleep in the dark, with the cold breathing on your neck like a ghost nun who never left. No one explains much. There's a rhythm to this place, but it's not your rhythm yet. Bells ring at strange hours. Footsteps echo down long hallways. Every door creaks. Every floorboard seems to remember all who've walked before you. It's not silent, but it is quiet. Oppressively so. There are other girls, novices like you, sleeping nearby. Some sob softly into their scratchy blankets. Others lie awake, eyes wide open. One whispers, Hail Marys, like she's trying to convince herself she belongs here. Maybe she does. You do not. Outside, the world continues. Carts roll, dogs bark, boys shout. You won't hear much of that soon. The walls are thick, built to keep out temptation. And you'll start to forget the sounds of market life, of your mother humming, or the church bells in the village square. A rat scurries along the base of the wall. You watch it for a moment, wondering if it's your new roommate. The sisters don't seem to mind them. They're part of the order now. When the abbess speaks to the others, it's with gravity. You've never seen anyone command silence like that. Not with a whip or sword, but with the simple weight of being watched. She's terrifying, in that maybe she was born holy kind of way. Rumor is she hasn't left the convent in 30 years. You wonder if her bones have fused to the stone. You spend your first day in confusion. There's no orientation, no welcome basket. Just the expectation that you'll observe, kneel when they kneel, and not faint during prayers. Did you eat today? You can't remember. Hunger has a different rhythm here. It hums under everything, like the echo of a forgotten bell. One of the older nuns finally takes pity. She tells you when to rise, when to bow, when to wash your hands. You thank her, but she gives you a sharp look, no speaking. You're not allowed. Not yet. You're still in your observance period, where your silence is your prayer, and your obedience is your ticket to staying. You cry that night, but quietly. The straw pokes through your shift. Your knees hurt from kneeling, and somewhere in your chest is a desperate, aching question. Is this what holiness feels like? Historians still argue whether girls like you entered convents by choice, or if families simply couldn't afford more dowries. Either way, you're here now. There's no going back. Not unless you want to be excommunicated, and good luck marrying with that on your resume. A curious fact: many noble families used nunneries as storage units for their extra daughters, especially the ones who weren't conventionally attractive or had inconvenient opinions. It's a holy calling, sure, but also a pretty convenient way to reduce family expenses. The night air inside the convent is colder than outside. Stone doesn't care about seasons. You wrap your arms around yourself and try to sleep. Above you, someone whispers, "Pax vobiscum," peace be with you. It doesn't help. The bell jolts you awake. It's not a gentle chime or a morning lullaby. It's a deep, metallic groan that sounds like someone dragging a cauldron across a tomb. You blink into the dark, unsure if you ever actually slept. Your body aches like it's been folded in half, and your mouth tastes like dust and regret. It's 2 a.m., prime, the first of the 7 canonical hours of prayer. You'll be visiting the chapel 7 times a day, sometimes more. And no, you don't get to skip because you're tired or cold or dying. Even the dying are dragged in on occasion, some on stretchers. You shuffle into your stiff robe and veil. The veil is damp. Why is it damp? The hall outside your cell is a blur of silent shadows. A dozen women, barely visible, moving as one toward the chapel. No one speaks. No one stumbles. They move like they've done this every day for 100 years. Some probably have. You try to match their pace, but your bare feet slap against the icy floor like fish on stone. You wince with every step. Your toes are already numb, and your breath comes out in small clouds. The air is so cold it bites. You're pretty sure your teeth are shivering. You enter the chapel and kneel immediately. No time to look around. The abbess is already in place, standing beneath a cracked crucifix. Candles sputter. Wax drips. Somewhere in the shadows, a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary watches you, expression unreadable. You mouth the words you've been told, Domine, labia mea aperis. Lord, open my lips. It's meant to be a prayer. It feels like a plea. For the next hour you chant psalms in Latin. You don't understand all the words, but that doesn't matter. You're not here to understand. You're here to obey, and to endure, and to pray that your knees hold out longer than your spirit. The Benedictine rule, which you're slowly learning, lays it all out. The schedule, the fasting, the silence, even the punishments, and it's surprisingly detailed. It tells you what to eat, not much, what to wear, wool mostly, and what to do if you have impure thoughts. Spoiler: it involves more prayer, lots more. A historical aside, not all nunneries followed the rules strictly. Some were surprisingly lax, allowing meat, personal books, even pets. But this one is old school, hardcore, the kind where saints are made and bodies are broken. By the time you return to your cell, It's still pitch dark outside. You collapse onto your straw mattress, only to be woken again at sunrise. That's lauds, morning prayers, followed by prime, then breakfast. But don't get too excited about that. We'll get there in a bit. For now, you stumble outside to the cloister walk, where the stone arches cast long shadows. You walk in a line with the others, arms folded, eyes down. You're not allowed to speak unless given permission. Most of the time, you don't even make eye contact. You've started to notice things. Sister Gertrude limps, always a step behind. Sister Margaret mutters to herself during prayers. And Sister Agnes, the one with the sunken eyes, smiles at walls. Maybe she sees angels. Maybe it's just years of sleep deprivation. There's a rhythm to it all. The bells ring. You pray. You sit. You kneel. You chant. You kneel again. And then maybe you eat. You spend the morning in study. That means scripture reading. In Latin. On hard benches. In a room where the only source of heat is a single candle and the friction from your own rage. Historians still argue whether most nuns were literate. It depended on the convent, the century, and your social class. Some copied manuscripts in beautiful calligraphy. Others couldn't spell their own names. You? You can read enough to recognize the Psalms, but not enough to enjoy them. By mid-morning, your legs are trembling. Not from exertion, from stillness. You haven't moved in hours. Your back aches, your hands are freezing, and then finally, the bell for terce rings. It's the third hour of prayer. You think that means it's around 9 a.m., but time's getting fuzzy. A fun fringe fact. Some nunneries had clocks, not the ticking kind, but huge water clocks or sundials to track prayers. Others just guessed based on the sun or the crowing of the cock. Here, time feels irrelevant. Everything is prayer. Everything is God's hour. You file into the chapel again. More kneeling, more chanting. You're pretty sure your knees are bruised. And your stomach? It's starting to growl. Which brings us to breakfast. But that's a misnomer. There's no breaking of the fast in the joyful sense. It's more like, here's something barely edible to keep you alive until Vespers. You head to the refectory, basically the convent's dining room. Long wooden tables. No chairs, just benches. A painting of the Last Supper hangs crookedly on the wall, possibly watching you with disappointment. The meal? A thin gruel. Mostly oats, possibly turnip. Occasionally there's a slice of bread so hard it could serve as building material. If you're lucky, there's fish. If you're really lucky, it's dead. You eat in silence while one sister reads scripture aloud. You're supposed to meditate while chewing. That's hard when you're trying to figure out if what you're chewing used to have legs. Occasionally, a guest brings cheese or a loaf of proper bread. That's a festival day. But today? Today is just gray and beige. Everything in here is some shade of beige. There's a strict order to where you sit. New novices like you are near the door. The elder sisters are closer to the abbess. She eats slower than everyone else, but she gets the biggest spoon. You're not bitter, just observant. You notice Sister Teresa hiding a bit of bread in her sleeve. Rule violation. But she's old. Maybe no one will notice. Or maybe someone will notice, and she'll be scrubbing floors for a week. Food finishes quickly. You rise in silence. No talking, no burping, no lingering glances. You file out, back into the cold stone hallways, and prepare for the next round of prayers. This is your life now. Bells, knees, cold. God. The Benedictine rule, which you're slowly learning, lays it all out. The schedule, the fasting, the silence, even the punishments. And it's surprisingly detailed. It tells you what to eat, Not much. What to wear, wool mostly, and what to do if you have impure thoughts. Spoiler. It involves more prayer, lots more. A historical aside. Not all nunneries followed the rules strictly. Some were surprisingly lax, allowing meat, personal books, even pets. But this one? This one is old school. Hardcore. The kind where saints are made and bodies are broken. By the time you return to your cell, it's still pitch dark outside. You collapse onto your straw mattress, only to be woken again at sunrise. That's lauds, morning prayers, followed by prime, then breakfast. But don't get too excited about that. We'll get there in a bit. For now, you stumble outside to the cloister walk, where the stone arches cast long shadows. You walk in a line with the others, arms folded, eyes down. You're not allowed to speak unless given permission. Most of the time, you don't even make eye contact. You've started to notice things. Sister Gertrude limps, always a step behind. Sister Margaret mutters to herself during prayers, and Sister Agnes, the one with the sunken eyes, smiles at walls. Maybe she sees angels. Maybe it's just years of sleep deprivation. There's a rhythm to it all. The bells ring. You pray. You sit. You kneel. You chant. You kneel again. And then, maybe, you eat. You spend the morning in study. That means scripture reading, in Latin, on hard benches, in a room where the only source of heat is a single candle and the friction from your own rage. Historians still argue whether most nuns were literate. It depended on the convent, the century, and your social class. Some copied manuscripts in beautiful calligraphy. Others couldn't spell their own names. You? You can read enough to recognize the Psalms, but not enough to enjoy them. By mid-morning, your legs are trembling. Not from exertion, from stillness. You haven't moved in hours. Your back aches. Your hands are freezing. And then finally, the bell for terce rings. It's the third hour of prayer. You think that means it's around 9 a.m., but time's getting fuzzy. A fun fringe fact. Some nunneries had clocks, not the ticking kind, but huge water clocks or sundials to track prayers. Others just guessed based on the sun or the crowing of the cock. Here, time feels irrelevant. Everything is prayer. Everything is God's hour. You file into the chapel again. More kneeling. More chanting. You're pretty sure your knees are bruised. And your stomach? It's starting to growl, which brings us to breakfast. But that's a misnomer. There's no breaking of the fast, in the joyful sense. It's more like, here's something barely edible to keep you alive until Vespers. You head to the refectory, basically the convent's dining room, long wooden tables, no chairs, just benches. A painting of the Last Supper hangs crookedly on the wall, possibly watching you with disappointment. The meal? A thin gruel, mostly oats, possibly turnip. Occasionally there's a slice of bread so hard it could serve as building material. If you're lucky, there's fish. If you're really lucky, it's dead. You eat in silence while one sister reads scripture aloud. You're supposed to meditate while chewing. That's hard when you're trying to figure out if what you're chewing used to have legs. Occasionally, a guest brings cheese or a loaf of proper bread. That's a festival day. But today is just gray and beige. Everything in here is some shade of beige. There's a strict order to where you sit. New novices like you are near the door. The elder sisters are closer to the abbess. She eats slower than everyone else, but she gets the biggest spoon. You're not bitter, just observant. You notice Sister Teresa hiding a bit of bread in her sleeve. Rule violation, but she's old. Maybe no one will notice, or maybe someone will notice, and she'll be scrubbing floors for a week. Food finishes quickly. You rise in silence. No talking, no burping, no lingering glances. You file out, back into the cold stone hallways, and prepare for the next round of prayers. This is your life now. Bells, knees, cold. God. You're told you have a cell of your own. Sounds promising, right? Don't get excited. Your cell is less of a sanctuary and more of a glorified closet. A rough wooden door with no lock, a single narrow slit for a window, if you can call a vertical crack in the wall a window, and a ceiling so low you can almost touch it if you stretch. The floor is cold, always. The walls leak in the rain. There's one shelf for your psalter, one peg for your robe, and a straw mattress that smells faintly like mildew and cabbage. The mattress sits on a wooden frame, but it sags in the middle. You think there may be something alive in the straw. You've already had to chase off one spider the size of a coin, and you're not convinced he's gone. And you're not alone. You're sharing this sacred space with another novice, Sister Cecilia. She's slightly older, more devout, and definitely more enthusiastic about self-denial. You suspect she was born for this life. She already knows all the Psalms by heart and crosses herself in her sleep. She also snores, loudly. At first you think it's some sort of nighttime ritual, perhaps holy wheezing. But no, it's just what happens when you inhale cold, damp air in a stone room full of dust, straw, and possible mold. There's no privacy, ever. You dress under your robe, sleep fully clothed, and relieve yourself only during scheduled communal breaks. The privy is a shared latrine trench out back, where the wind whistles in judgment and the smell could knock over a cow. Bathing is infrequent. You've heard whispers, once a month if you're lucky. In winter, sometimes not at all. There's a stone basin in the courtyard where you can splash your face with frigid water, enough to freeze your eyebrows. You use a small cloth to wipe down the rest of your body. You pretend it's refreshing. There's no soap. Sometimes vinegar. Sometimes ashes mixed with water. And if you're truly blessed, rosemary. But mostly it's just a brisk splash and a quick prayer that no one notices the lice. Yes, lice. They're a given. Everyone has them. You see nuns occasionally scratching discreetly beneath their veils. There's a certain look you give each other when you realize you're both hosting uninvited guests. It's not shameful. It's just Tuesday. At night, the cell grows colder than you thought possible. The walls seem to sweat, and the damp seeps into your bones. You try to huddle into your robe, but wool doesn't do much when it's damp. You breathe into your hands, warm them against your chest, and wish, desperately, for a fire. But fires are forbidden in cells, too dangerous. You begin to treasure socks. Wool socks, no matter how itchy, are a form of medieval luxury. You don't have any yet, but you dream of them. Maybe if you impress the abbess, someone will knit you a pair. Or maybe Sister Cecilia will give you hers. Though, let's be real, she won't. A historical tidbit. Some nunneries in Northern Europe allowed small braziers in winter, especially for older sisters. But younger ones? No such luck. Cold builds character. And chilblains. You spend a lot of time sitting on a wooden stool. You read, you copy texts, you knit, you pray, and sometimes you just sit, trying not to fall asleep. That's a punishable offense, by the way. Dozing during meditation is a big no-no. During the long silences, your mind wanders. You think of your family, your siblings, the boy who used to sell apples in the market. What was his name? Peter? Paul? It doesn't matter now. You won't see him again. You won't see anyone again outside these walls. not unless they're dying or dead. You hear stories from the older sisters about visions, about miracles, about ghosts. One of them says a former nun still walks the halls, barefoot, weeping for her sins. Another claims she saw the Virgin Mary in the cloister garden during a snowstorm, smiling and warm despite the wind. You're skeptical. But when you wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding and candle stub flickering, you start to wonder. Historians still argue whether these stories were sincere spiritual experiences or just hallucinations from sleep deprivation and fasting. Frankly, after 3 days of less than 4 hours of sleep and exactly 0 sugar, you're starting to see things too. You try to find comfort in the rhythm of the prayers, the repeating Latin phrases, the familiar cadences. But it's hard to stay focused when your stomach is growling and your hands are numb. Some sisters look serene when they pray, beatific even. You look like you're trying not to sneeze. One evening, you overhear a confession. You're not supposed to. But walls here are thin, and the sound carries. A senior sister weeps softly, confessing to impure dreams. The priest absolves her, but his tone is more annoyed than comforting. You didn't know dreams counted as sins. You'll have to be careful. Last night you dreamt about roast chicken. Hopefully that doesn't count. You realize something, lying in your cell. Holiness is exhausting. You thought this would be peaceful, a life of quiet devotion, maybe a little singing, some nice gardening. But this is not peace. This is effort, discipline, cold floors, and colder soup. And yet, there's something about the way the nuns walk in silence, the stillness of the chapel at night, the scent of candle smoke and damp parchment, a strange comfort in the repetition, the ritual. You're still not sure if you're meant for this life, but you're starting to see how someone could believe they are. You're starting to look forward to breakfast, which is saying something, considering breakfast in a medieval nunnery is roughly 1 step above starvation and 3 steps below prison gruel. The bell rings, echoing through the stone corridors like a voice from another world. You shuffle to the refectory with the rest of the sisters. It's cold, always cold. The benches are worn smooth by centuries of shivering behinds, and the table is already set. Wooden bowls, wooden spoons, and a faint glisten of something steaming in a large pot that smells beige. A nun stands at the lectern, already reading from scripture. Her voice is even, monotone. You try to focus, but your stomach is louder than the Gospel of John. You sit where you're told, always in order of rank. Novices near the back, silently hoping today's stew doesn't involve weevils. Sister Agnes told you the bread sometimes comes from old altar offerings. It's dry, hard, and almost sacramental. You bite down and it flakes apart like sandstone. A sip of weak ale or watered wine helps it down. Today's meal is pottage, a thin stew made from peas, onions, maybe some barley if you're lucky. Definitely cabbage. Always cabbage. The flavor sits somewhere between soggy hope and regret. There's also a fish head floating in the pot. One, it gets passed around like a holy relic. You politely decline when it comes your way. Speaking of fish, here's your historical tidbit of the day. Meat is forbidden most days of the week, except for the sick or elderly. Fish is allowed, but only on Fridays and feast days. However, some orders cleverly stretch the rules, eating beavers, otters, and even puffins. Why? Because they lived in water, and someone in a robe decided that made them spiritually fish. Makes sense. Back to your pottage. You sip. It's hot at least. You count the peas in your bowl. 12. Lucky day. Sister Cecilia, seems to have gotten more. You're not allowed to mention it, obviously. Talking during meals is forbidden unless you're the reader. And even then, it's not exactly table conversation. You glance around. Everyone eats slowly, methodically, spoon to mouth, one hand behind the back. No chewing noises. You chew as quietly as possible, which is surprisingly difficult when your food sounds like someone stepping through wet hay. After the meal, there's a moment of silent prayer. You bow your head, trying not to fall asleep. Someone coughs. Someone else sneezes into their robe. There's no bless you, just more scripture. Then, as quickly as it began, breakfast is over. Bowls are cleared. You rise, hands folded, and file out again into the cold halls. Your stomach is half full. Your fingers are tingling, and your nose is already running from the icy draft that seems to live in the refectory year-round. You wonder what lunch will be like. Don't get your hopes up. The food is prepared by a rotation of nuns. Kitchen duty is part of everyone's training. When your turn comes, you spend 6 hours chopping, boiling, and stirring over an open fire. The smoke burns your eyes. Your hands reek of onions for days. And the fire? It's warm, yes, but you're not allowed to linger. Luxury is sinful, remember? The kitchens are better stocked than you expected. Some convents even have herb gardens, chickens, and cheese-making rooms. Yours has a little of everything, depending on the season. In spring, nettles and wild garlic. In fall, apples and turnips. In winter, mostly hope. You once saw Sister Benedicta sneak a bite of cheese. She looked over both shoulders like a criminal, and when she caught your eye, she winked. You nearly dropped your ladle. There's a kind of quiet rebellion here. Not outright defiance, just tiny moments of stolen comfort. A crumb of bread, an extra ladle of soup, a joke shared in gestures. No one ever says it, but everyone knows. If you didn't bend the rules a little, you'd break. Historians still argue whether convents were truly strict or just appeared that way on paper. The rule of St. Benedict was a guide, but enforcement varied wildly. Some abbesses ruled with iron fists. Others looked the other way. You're still figuring out where yours falls on that spectrum. After breakfast, you return to your duties. Today, you're assigned to clean the cloister hallway. That means scrubbing the stone floor with a brush made from stiff boar hair. It does not mean soap. Your hands are raw within 10 minutes. As you scrub, you think of home. Your mother used to scrub floors too, but she did it while humming. Here, the only sound is the distant chanting of the choir sisters. You pass by the chapter house, the room where the abbess meets with the senior nuns to discuss discipline. It's where punishments are handed out. Public penance, extra fasting, solitary prayer. You peek in once and see a sister kneeling on bare stone, arms outstretched in silent penance. You quickly look away. Outside, the sun is trying to shine through the thick clouds. You're allowed 10 minutes in the garden. Just 10. You walk along the frozen rows of herbs and stare at a shriveled rosemary bush. It smells like the outside world. It makes your chest ache. There's a bench in the garden, slightly tilted from years of use. You sit. Sister Cecilia joins you but says nothing. She just rests her hand briefly on yours, then pulls it back. That's all. No words, no eye contact. But in that tiny moment, you feel something. Not quite peace, not quite joy. Maybe endurance. The holy kind. The silence in the convent is not what you expected. It isn't peaceful or meditative. It's dense, heavy. a silence that watches you more than you live in it. You don't just keep quiet here, you inhabit quietness, wear it like a second veil. You've taken a vow of silence, at least during certain hours. It's part of the rule. Not total silence. You're not a hermit, but enough to notice how loud your own thoughts become. Enough that a dropped spoon feels like thunder, that a sneeze causes a ripple of side eyes, that when someone accidentally hums during work, it's practically a scandal. The oddest part? There is a language here, a secret one, the gesture language. Since nuns can't always speak, they've created a kind of visual shorthand. A raised finger to the lips means silence. Tapping your chest means mea culpa, my fault. And food? Oh, food has a whole dictionary. 2 fingers to the mouth for hunger, a flick of the wrist for wine, a circle traced on your palm for bread. There's even one for cheese. You find it strangely beautiful, like a ballet of tired arms. It makes you feel included, even when you're new and fumbling. Sister Cecilia teaches you some signs in the garden. She uses exaggerated motions and smiles when you get it wrong. It's the first time you've seen her smile. The abbess doesn't sign. She speaks. Slowly, deliberately, and only when necessary. Her words are measured like coins, precious and rare. When she addresses you directly, only once so far, it feels like being summoned by a queen. You stammered out, "Yes, Reverend Mother," and promptly tripped over your own robes. Historians still argue whether these gesture languages were formal or improvised. Some convents had entire codified systems, over 200 signs. Others made it up as they went. But the idea that silence required its own grammar? That's the kind of thing medieval life excels at, turning suffering into ceremony. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means your inner voice gets louder. You remember snatches of songs from home, conversations, arguments, your father's voice stern and low, your mother's laugh, the market square shouting, the bells of your village church, all echoing now in a stone chamber filled with nuns who don't speak unless they have to. You try not to think of your brothers, or the girl you used to play with near the well. She married last spring. You wonder if she has warm bread in her house, if her husband is kind, if she still thinks of you. During work periods, you're not allowed idle chatter, even if you're hauling baskets or kneading dough. But gestures are fine. You start to recognize different personalities through them. Sister Agnes signs so quickly it's like she's throwing words. Sister Margaret signs slowly, reverently, like she's in a constant state of prayer. Sister Benedicta just winks when she doesn't know the right sign. It's weirdly effective. Sometimes you break the rules. Whisper a word here, a phrase there, just to hear yourself. Cold, you say one morning, lips barely moving. Sister Cecilia glances at you, doesn't report you, just nods. You learn how to listen differently. The rhythm of sweeping, the rustle of robes, the distant flutter of chapel candles, the soft murmur of Latin prayers echoing down stone hallways, the clatter of wood bowls being stacked. Every sound becomes sharper in silence. A fringe fact for you. Some convents had designated talking hours, usually during manual labor. Others allowed speaking only with the abbess's permission. But many took pride in perfect silence. It was seen as proof of holiness. Proof you could control your most human urges, like the urge to scream. Because yes, sometimes you want to scream. You want to shout that your robe is too tight, that you miss honey and laughter and warm sun on your skin, that your feet hurt and your knees are bleeding, that you are so bored you're counting cracks in the ceiling beams. Again, But instead, you press your palms together, bow your head, and sign for more water. The silence also hides things. One afternoon, you notice Sister Agnes slipping away. She walks quietly, but her gait is nervous. You follow, curious, not too closely. She heads toward the old herb cellar. You pause at the corner and peek in. She's not stealing. She's crying, shoulders shaking, bent over an empty basket. You back away, make the sign for prayer, and walk on. Later you see her at Vespers, pale, still, singing as if nothing happened. You wonder how many sisters carry their grief like that, silently, carefully, like relics. You begin to understand why the gesture for mercy is just hands opened wide, not toward God, but toward each other. You keep a mental notebook of the signs. You add your own, too. A slight tug at your veil to mean, "Are you okay?" A tilt of the head for, "Can I help?" A wrinkle of the nose for, "This soup again?" There's a kind of poetry in the silence, a softness. You don't miss the yelling of the outside world, or the drunk shouting, or the way men used to catcall in the village square. But still, sometimes at night, when Cecilia's snoring is gentler than usual and the wind isn't banging the shutters, you whisper a single word into your pillow. Just one. Maybe your name, maybe a prayer. Just to remind yourself that you're still here. You've been assigned your first regular duty. You were hoping for something romantic, maybe copying manuscripts in a candlelit scriptorium, your robe gently swaying as you glide across the parchment like a medieval scholar angel. Instead, you're given cheese duty, dairy, a noble profession if you like the smell of sour milk and the constant fear of curd failure. Sister Benedicta trains you. She's squat, stern, and smells faintly of goat. Her hands are permanently stained with whey, and she wields a ladle like a knight wields a sword. She doesn't speak, of course, but she signs, rapidly. You barely keep up. Cheesemaking isn't glamorous. It's early mornings, boiling milk, adding rennet. From calves' stomachs, by the way, you're welcome. And waiting. Lots of waiting. Then pressing, then flipping, then storing in a cold room where the walls sweat and the cheese wheels look like petrified bread. But hey, at least it's warm in the dairy room. And when the abbess isn't looking, Benedicta lets you nibble the soft corners of the curds. You've never tasted anything so alive. It squeaks against your teeth and tastes like rebellion. You learn quickly. Duties rotate. Today it's cheese, tomorrow it might be gardening, laundry, candle making, or the dreaded latrine maintenance. The jobs change, but the rhythm remains. Bells, prayer, work, prayer, bread, prayer, sleep, prayer. Some sisters work in the scriptorium, copying religious texts by hand. Not you, not yet. Only the most literate, the most trusted, are allowed near ink. Ink is precious. Parchment, even more so. A single calfskin can produce just a few pages. Mistakes are corrected with tiny razors or scraped off with bone knives. There's no backspace key here. A mainstream fact. Women in convents were among the best educated of their time. They learned Latin, philosophy, medicine, even astronomy. Some became skilled artists, painting illuminated manuscripts with gold leaf and crushed lapis lazuli. One German nun, Hildegard of Bingen, even composed music that's still performed today. You wonder if you'll ever get to do that. For now, you scrub buckets and churn curds. Gardening is next. The convent's garden is walled, simple and orderly. It grows herbs, sage, rosemary, thyme, and vegetables like leeks, onions, cabbage, and turnips. Always turnips. You dig with a wooden spade that gives you blisters. Your knees ache. Dirt gets into your sleeves, your shoes, your teeth. But in the garden, at least, there's light. You pause sometimes to breathe in the rosemary, to press the mint between your fingers and feel something living. Sister Cecilia joins you, pulling weeds. She signs something at you, sun, and points to the sky. It's the first truly warm day since you arrived. You both tilt your faces upward, eyes closed, just for a moment. It feels like sin, the good kind. Laundry day is a different beast. There's no soap, just ash lye and elbow grease. You scrub robes against washboards until your knuckles bleed. You rinse them in icy water from the river behind the convent wall. You beat them against rocks. You hang them up on ropes stretched between trees. Then, you pray it doesn't rain. And let's talk about candle duty. Candle duty sounds romantic. Warm, glowing, monastic. It's not. It's animal fat. Boiling, congealing, stinking animal fat. You dip the wick, let it cool, dip again, repeat 6 times. You smell like tallow for 3 days afterward. And heaven help you if your wick is crooked. Sister Magdalene checks every candle like she's inspecting royal jewelry. You fail your first batch. You get it right the second time. She nods, just once. It feels like a standing ovation. You also learn to repair sandals, patch robes, stitch altar cloths. You sew with thick thread and fingers raw from the cold. You poke yourself a lot. You bleed on your work. No one minds. Blood here is kind of holy. Each task is humbling and exhausting and necessary. Historians still argue whether these duties were empowering or just servitude in a dress. Some say convents gave women rare independence, land to manage, books to read, even political influence. Others say it was just another cage, wrapped in piety. You're not sure yet. Some days it feels like both. But within this back-breaking schedule, something strange happens. You find rhythm, a kind of flow. Your hands move on their own. Your mind drifts. You start to notice things. How the bees move through the lavender. How Sister Agnes always hums off-key while digging potatoes. How the stone path through the garden holds heat long after sunset. You start to feel capable, not holy, not yet, but steady. One day the abbess assigns you to help in the infirmary. It smells like vinegar, boiled herbs, and something older, something musty. There are beds lined along the wall, straw mats beneath each one. Most of the patients are other sisters, sick with coughs, fevers, infected wounds. There's no physician. Just Sister Martha, who knows more about poultices than most king's doctors. You grind herbs with a mortar and pestle. You change linens. You help clean wounds that make your stomach twist. One sister has a festering boil on her leg. Sister Martha lances it with a hot needle. You nearly faint. No one says anything. But later, she gives you the bigger piece of bread at supper. Sister Martha shows you how to make salves from comfrey, yarrow, honey, and lard. She lets you taste one. It's bitter. But it works. You memorize her instructions. You never know when it'll be your turn in that bed. And at night, when your fingers throb and your spine feels like it's been stacked backward, you lie on your straw mattress and stare at the ceiling. You count breaths. You wonder, is this what God wanted? Or did someone just need help churning butter? Winter doesn't arrive. It descends. Like a heavy wet wool cloak that someone throws over your shoulders without asking. The air smells sharper. The chapel stones sting your bare feet during matins, and the silence inside becomes thicker, like even sound has frozen somewhere mid-prayer. You wake up shivering under your straw-stuffed mattress. It's not cold. It's medieval cold. No glass windows, no heating, just stone, wind, and the occasional rat who seems perfectly happy with the arrangement. Your breath fogs the air as you change into your daily robe, the fabric stiff from dampness. You wrap a second layer around your shoulders, unofficially, of course. Technically, extra garments are frowned upon, but you're not trying to impress anyone. Everything slows in winter. The garden sleeps under frost. The hens lay fewer eggs. Your fingers crack open from scrubbing laundry with ash lye and river water that's turned to slush. Sister Magdalene hands you a jar of animal fat to rub into your knuckles. You hesitate, remembering the candle room. She shrugs as if to say, "It's all connected, dear." And yet, there's a kind of magic to it. The cloister takes on a hush deeper than silence. Snow falls in hushed layers outside the chapel window, and you begin to understand why so many saints wrote poetry. Even in a place where you're not allowed to speak much, some feelings demand a voice. There's a curious warmth in the dormitory, even if it's not physical. Sisters begin sleeping closer together, not to break rules, but to break the cold. You wake up sometimes with someone's foot against your shin, or someone's breath on your neck. No one apologizes. No one moves. This is the closest thing to comfort you're allowed. A mainstream historical fact. Many medieval nunneries ran surprisingly advanced hospitals for the time. Despite a lack of formal medical training, nuns provided care that often outshone urban doctors, especially during plagues. Their diet of herbs, fasting, and ritual actually produced lower infection rates. Ironically, modern medicine is still catching up to some of their routines. On feast days, the rules soften. Not entirely, but just enough. Meals are slightly longer, prayers slightly fewer. On St. Lucia's Day, the novices perform a short procession. You wear a wreath of candles, real, burning candles, on your head. You're terrified. The wax drips down your hair. The flames dance as you shuffle forward, humming. You feel ridiculous. But you also feel, strangely, radiant. There's an occasional story night in the refectory when the abbess permits a reading. It's always scripture, but you enjoy the rhythm. One sister reads aloud in Latin, the vowels rounded, the cadence hypnotic. You don't understand every word, but your mind fills in images. A burning bush, a flood, a desert. Your own little dream theater. And here's where things take a weirder turn. You start dreaming in chants, not songs exactly, but echoes. You wake up in the middle of the night certain you've just finished singing something, only you can't remember what. The music disappears the moment your eyes open, like fog off a lake. You glance around and see other sisters stirring too. Maybe you're not the only one hearing it. One night, you think you hear whispering, low, urgent murmurs coming from the chapel. You slip out of bed, bare feet on stone. You press your ear against the oak door. Silence. You push the door open gently. Inside, 3 sisters kneel in front of the altar. They're not praying the usual prayers. They're chanting something ancient, older than Latin. You don't recognize the rhythm. It's beautiful, dissonant, almost too beautiful. They look back, startled. Then one of them gestures you away. You shuffle back to bed. But something's shifted. Quirky tidbit time. In some regions, nuns believed that certain prayers sung at midnight could thin the veil between the physical world and the divine. These rituals, unofficial and secretive, were whispered down generations, some involving strange harmonies, others focused on candlelight patterns or moon phases. Modern scholars still debate whether these were mystical experiences or just the result of long-term malnutrition and sleep deprivation. Your daily duties become harder in winter. Everything takes twice as long. Your joints ache. The bread is harder. the soup thinner. You catch a fever in late December and are sent to the infirmary to lie on a straw mat and sweat it out. Sister Martha gives you boiled willow bark and wraps your legs in warm cloth soaked in elderflower water. You dream of open fields and warm air. You dream of your old life, though the details are fuzzier now. One night, while still feverish, you think you see a figure at the foot of your bed. She's cloaked in a deep blue robe. You blink. She's gone. You wake in a sweat. The fever breaks. And somehow, you feel lighter. Historians still argue whether mystical visions among nuns were evidence of spiritual enlightenment, mental illness, or simply poor diet. Some records describe mass visions, entire convents seeing angels, or weeping statues, or the Virgin herself walking among them. Others suggest it was rye bread mold. You decide not to think too hard about it. Because deep down, part of you hopes it was real. You recover by January, just in time for the New Year's fast. This one is longer, stricter, fewer indulgences. The abbess allows no butter, no eggs. Your skin feels stretched. Your thoughts become strange. But somehow, your prayers feel sharper. Your voice, which once cracked during chants, grows steadier. You're trusted now to lead a few lines during lauds. It's a tiny thing. But when your voice echoes through the chapel and you hear others join you, it feels like someone lighting a match in the cold. You're still hungry, still cold. But now, you're also something else. Part of the rhythm. You reach a strange kind of equilibrium. Not peace, exactly, but routine, finely worn like a smooth stone in your pocket. The discomforts are familiar now, almost predictable. Your body aches in the same places. Your thoughts loop through the same prayers. Even your dreams begin to follow a pattern, spinning like a slow-turning wheel. Spring tiptoes in with soft fingers. A thin green line appears at the edge of the convent garden, and one morning you hear a bird. Not just any bird, a blackbird. You pause in the herb patch with your hands in the earth and just listen. It feels scandalous how loud it is, like music in a library. You're assigned more duties now. That's what happens when you survive your first winter and don't die of infection, frostbite, or quiet despair. You're useful, reliable. You're trusted with unlocking the food stores. You sweep the chapter house unsupervised. Sister Agnes even lets you slice the bread at supper, which, believe it or not, is kind of a big deal. And then one day you're chosen to accompany 2 other nuns to the nearby village. The excitement is real. You haven't left the convent walls in months. You tuck your veil a little tighter, heart hammering, trying not to look thrilled. Outside the gates, the world feels louder, rougher. Mud squelches beneath your shoes. A man shouts at a donkey. Children run barefoot past you, throwing pebbles and swearing creatively. Your tiny caravan makes its way to the marketplace, where Sister Cecilia barters for lentils and wax. You're there to carry things, but also you're learning. You pass a tavern with its door wide open, laughter spilling out like smoke. Someone sings an old song. You know the melody. It was banned in the convent, too raucous for divine ears. Still, it plays in your mind like a forbidden memory. Mainstream historical fact. Many convents during the medieval period had economic ties to their surrounding villages. Nuns often acted as landlords, managers of farmland, and even lenders. Far from isolated, many religious women wielded considerable administrative power, sometimes more than local lords. You notice something else in town. The stairs. Some are curious. Some are scornful. Some, especially from the men, linger too long. You keep your eyes down. Not because you're afraid, but because you've been trained to disappear. Nuns are meant to be humble shadows, not moving targets. A little girl tugs your sleeve. She asks if you're a real nun. You nod. She asks if God talks to you. You open your mouth, then close it. What would you say? That sometimes you feel a presence during matins? That once you smelled roses during a fast, even though it was February? That maybe God talks, but not in words? You smile gently. Sometimes, you say. She runs off, satisfied. Quirky tidbit time. In some areas, villagers believed that touching a nun's veil could bring good luck or cure headaches. This led to some awkward situations where curious townsfolk would try to sneak a touch mid-procession. It got so bad in 13th century York that nuns had to travel under armed escort. So much for quiet devotion. Back at the convent, you're more aware of the boundary now. Inside, order, silence, predictability. Outside, chaos, color, danger. You're not sure which you prefer. The abbess starts giving you more responsibility. You copy scripture in the scriptorium now, painstakingly, letter by letter. Ink-stained fingers, sore wrists, and the occasional slip that gets you a stern look from Sister Clara. But still, it's sacred work. Important. You learn to shape each A like a tiny teardrop, each G like a musical note. Sometimes, when no one's looking, you add a tiny doodle in the margins, a flower, a fish, a smiling moon. Nothing blasphemous, just life. Historians still argue whether these whimsical sketches were acts of quiet rebellion or spiritual meditation. Some say the nuns who drew smiling bunnies and holy manuscripts were bored. Others think they were encoding secret messages. Either way, they make the pages feel more human. You get better at fasting, better at silence, better at knowing which sister is crying, even when she says she isn't. There's a rhythm to grief here, just like everything else. Sister Helena's mother dies, and the news reaches her through a letter scrawled by a cousin. There's no funeral for her to attend, no grieving clothes to wear, just a quiet breakfast, a brief prayer, and a red-eyed Helena pretending she's fine. You sit beside her in the chapel that night. You don't speak. You just breathe together. Outside, the world spins on. Plagues rage. Kings die. Cities burn. But inside these stone walls, time moves like honey dripping from a spoon. Slow. Sticky. Sweet, if you let it be. You start to notice the smell of books, the way old parchment carries the scent of dust and oil and memory. You find yourself fascinated by saints' stories, especially the weird ones. One girl fasts until she can hear angels. Another survives on nothing but communion wafers for 3 years. Yet another receives a vision where Jesus hands her his own heart, bleeding, warm, still beating. You read these and think, was that devotion or hallucination? Maybe both. Maybe that's the point. During a rare thunderstorm, lightning strikes a nearby tree. The boom echoes through the stone walls, and for a moment, you're convinced it was divine punishment. You drop to your knees. So does everyone else. The abbess later assures you it was just weather. You're not so sure. One night you wake to soft footsteps. Sister Teresa slips into your bed and curls beside you, whispering that the wind is too loud. You let her stay. You both sleep better. No one mentions it in the morning. Because here's the secret. The rules are strict, yes, but they're written on paper. The kindnesses are written in silence, in glances, in shared bread crusts and lingering hands. You start to understand that God might be in the spaces between the rules, the way a cracked wall still lets in sunlight. The days stretch and fold into each other like a warm quilt. There are moments when you don't remember what day it is, and it doesn't matter. Time inside the convent is elastic. Seasons come and go, marked only by changes in chores and what grows in the herb garden. You've been here long enough now that your old life feels dreamlike. You try to recall the sound of your father's voice, the scent of your mother's soap, the weight of your old wool cloak, but it slips through your mental fingers like smoke. You can still picture their faces, though, dim like faded frescoes in a damp chapel. You've become someone else, not reborn exactly, but overwritten. There's a feast day coming up, St. Hildegard's Day. It's not a major holiday, but the abbess makes a point of honoring female saints. You spend the week preparing, cleaning, polishing, baking dense loaves of honeyed rye bread and whipping egg whites for almond custards. The kitchen smells almost sinful, warm, sweet, alive. There's even music, a rare treat, sung by the older sisters in Latin harmonies so hauntingly beautiful it gives you chills. That night, the candles burn longer. No one speaks unless they must. And when the abbess reads from Hildegard's writings, her visions, her poems, her songs from heaven, you feel something stir in your chest that you can't name. Mainstream historical fact. Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century German nun, was a polymath, composer, mystic, writer, and herbalist. She claimed divine visions and corresponded with emperors and popes. Her scientific texts on healing plants were used for centuries. She's now recognized as a doctor of the church. You wonder, will anyone ever read your words 1,000 years from now? Or will they crumble with your bones and be swept away with the rest of the dust? You catch a cold. It starts as a sniffle, then becomes a cough, then a wheezing tightness in your chest. You try to hide it, but Sister Maria notices and sends you to the infirmary. It's your first time really being sick in the convent. They wrap you in boiled wool and spoon you herbal syrup made from horehound and honey. It's bitter and sticky and oddly comforting. You lie in bed and watch candlelight flicker across the low stone ceiling, listening to the soft shuffle of the infirmarian's sandals as she tends to others. A girl 2 beds over dies. Just like that. She'd been quiet for days, just breathing like a bellows, her eyes glassy, and then gone. They don't speak her name afterward. Her things are burned, her space swept clean. You'd think she never existed. Quirky tidbit. In some medieval convents, death was seen as a joyful event. Marriage to Christ, at last. Nuns who passed were sometimes dressed in bridal white, complete with flower crowns. It sounds lovely, until you remember the average age of death for women in that era was around 40. Less honeymoon, more hasty funeral. Your recovery is slow. You lose your appetite. You stop speaking for days. No one pressures you. Silence is expected. But Sister Clara leaves small gifts on your cot. A dried sprig of lavender, a smooth river stone, a bit of yarn twisted into a braid, little gestures. Each one says, "You matter. Don't vanish like she did. You survive." But it leaves a mark. You see the world in a sharper light now. The chapel feels colder, the prayers more desperate. God doesn't feel as close as before, more like a shadow at the edge of your vision. You start dreaming about running, always running, through fields, through cities, through mud, but never reaching anything. You wake with your heart pounding and fingers clenched. Historians still argue whether dreams in the convent were considered divine messages or just human frailty. Some abbesses wrote them down in dream journals. Others ordered confession and penance for wanton imaginings. You've stopped reporting yours. Your hands become rough from garden work. The soil refuses to leave your fingernails no matter how hard you scrub. Your knees are permanently bruised from prayer. And your eyes now read faces like scripture. You know when Sister Magdalena is lying about her migraines. You can predict which novice will break first and ask to leave. You sense, even before it happens, that Sister Teresa won't be staying. She's called into the abbess's quarters one morning. You never hear what's said. But the next day, she's gone. Her cot is stripped bare. Her shoes are missing. No one says a word about her departure. She's simply erased. You catch yourself crying over it while peeling root vegetables. You aren't sure if it's because you miss her or because you envy her. And then comes the storm. Not a metaphorical one, a real one. It howls for 3 days straight. The wind tears through the cloister like an angry beast. Rain seeps in through the cracks. The chapel's bell is knocked sideways, its ringing warped and wild. A tree falls across the south wall. You help clear the branches with soaked skirts and frozen hands, shivering through the work. You're not allowed to complain, of course. Pain is part of the purification process, so you murmur the psalms under your breath and try not to slip in the mud. After the storm passes, a rainbow appears, and for the first time in weeks, you smile, just a little. That night, Sister Agnes tells a story in hushed tones of a nun in the Alps who once saw a storm like this and declared it the voice of God himself. He's angry with the world, she said, but not with us. You wish you could believe that. Still, when you return to your cot that night, you whisper a tiny prayer, not for strength, not for holiness, but for softness, just for a moment of it. And you dream, not of running, but of standing still in a sun-dappled field. The convent's rhythm continues, steady as a heartbeat. Morning bells, chores, vespers, cold fingers in winter, sore ankles in summer. You've been here long enough now that you can't remember exactly how long. Months, years, time folds in on itself, a spiral of repetition. But even in this pattern, changes flicker through like threads of gold in rough linen. There's a new novice, barely more than a child. You notice her clumsy walk, the nervous glances. Her name is Beatrice, and she speaks so softly, it's like trying to hear a shadow breathe. You're assigned to guide her, show her how to twist the candle wicks, how to scrape candle drippings into molds, how to bow correctly, when to speak, when to stay silent. She looks up to you. You can feel it. And somehow, that responsibility changes you again. One night, she asks if you ever miss the outside world. You both lie awake on your cots in the narrow dormitory, staring at the wooden beams above, lit by a pale moon through the slatted windows. You hesitate. Then you say, yes, but not all of it. She's quiet for a long time. Then, do you think God hears us? You tell her the truth. I don't know, but I think someone should. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval convents used ear tubes built into the confessional wall, like early sound tunnels, so even whispers could travel to a priest seated far away. You wonder if God needs an ear tube too, some divine conduit to carry your timid hopes and quiet doubts. Beatrice settles in. She becomes stronger. Her posture straightens. Her hands grow rougher. She learns your favorite psalm and hums it while hanging laundry, even when she thinks no one's listening. Watching her grow is like looking into your past. You realize how much you've changed, even if the mirror still shows the same tired eyes. One afternoon, word spreads like wildfire. The bishop is coming. You'd think Christ himself was arriving, the way the abbess moves. You're swept into preparations, scrubbing everything, polishing every candlestick until it shines like gold. Even the crucifixes get dusted with feather brushes. Sister Clara stitches lace onto the altar cloths by candlelight until her eyes go red. You're pulled from garden work and assigned to rehearse the choir. The abbess says your voice has clarity. It feels like both a compliment and a curse. You sing the same Latin hymns until your throat feels like scraped bark. When the bishop finally arrives, it's underwhelming. He's small, pudgy. His rings glitter, but his eyes are tired. He blesses everything he sees, crosses himself at every doorway, eats too many honey cakes and leaves crumbs on the pews. He smells faintly of wine. Mainstream historical fact. Bishops in the Middle Ages held immense power, not just religious, but political. Many were appointed by kings. Some never stepped foot in a church outside ceremonies. Several lived in luxury bordering on sin, fine wines, hunting parties, even illegitimate children hidden away in villages. During his visit, the bishop praises the discipline of your order. He says your cloister is a model of piety. The abbess beams. You all pretend not to hear him mispronounce half the Latin in the final benediction. Then, just like that, he's gone, and things return to normal. Mostly. Except now, rumors whisper through the halls. The bishop is considering removing some land from the abbey's holdings. He wants to redirect funds to a newer monastery downriver. The abbess is furious, but careful. You see her praying more, fasting more. She looks thinner, her voice sharper. One night, after the bells have rung, you catch her alone in the garden. She's weeding, barefoot, her hands shaking. She doesn't see you, but you see her. The cracks, the wear, the faith held together with threadbare strings. You feel an unexpected kinship with her, not as a superior or holy figure, but as another woman bound in silence, carrying weight she never asked for. Historians still argue whether abbesses truly held power, or if their authority was always tethered by bishops and politics. Some wielded influence like queens, others were pawns in a system that only pretended to listen to women. Your abbess, for all her sternness, is clearly fighting battles no one else sees. Winter creeps in again. The stone walls of the convent hold the cold like an old grudge. You sleep under 3 blankets, but still your toes ache each morning. The well water freezes. Your breath fogs indoors. And then it snows. Not just a dusting, a deep, quiet, blanketing snow that muffles every footstep. The convent becomes a painting. Still, silent, holy. Beatrice sneaks you a snowball. You gasp, laughing like a child. She throws another. It lands in your lap. And for one brief moment, you are outside time, a girl again, just a girl. You both run through the cloister, skirts flying, trying not to fall on the icy stones. Even Sister Magdalena cracks a smile as she watches from the window. Later that night, you sit in the chapel, catching the last flickers of candlelight, and something inside you shifts. Not like a revelation, more like a quiet agreement. You're not trapped here. Not exactly. You chose this. Not once, but over and over every day that you stay. And even if God feels far away, even if no one outside these walls knows your name, here, you are not invisible. Here, you are Spring real. Slinks back into the world, and with it comes the scent of thawed earth and the steady drip of melting snow from the roof's edge. The convent stirs like an old dog waking from a nap. Crocuses poke through the ground near the herb garden, delicate and defiant. Bees return, buzzing lazily through the air like drunken messengers, and with the warmth comes work. Endless, muddy, back-breaking work. The fields need digging, the fences mending, the sheep shearing. You and the other nuns trudge into the softening soil with worn tools and aching knees. Mud cakes your sandals. Your hands blister again. But you don't complain. Not much. You hum instead. So does Beatrice now. Her voice has grown confident, lilting. She's taller. Her cheeks have color. She still asks questions, but now fewer of them are whispered. You catch her laughing with Sister Helena one morning. A real laugh, loud and snorty. It echoes off the stone like a heresy, and you smile because you remember what that used to feel like. Before guilt made joy seem suspicious. Mainstream historical fact. Many medieval convents were largely self-sufficient. The nuns raised livestock, brewed ale, cultivated medicinal gardens, and even ran scriptoriums copying texts. Far from passive cloisters, some convents were thriving centers of productivity and surprisingly progressive havens of female skill and autonomy. Today, you're assigned to the apothecary. It smells like lavender, vinegar, beeswax, and death. You grind dried chamomile with a mortar that predates the convent. Sister Agnes, the oldest nun still breathing, oversees the place. Her left eye is permanently shut and her hands tremble, but her memory is a fortress. Rosemary for memory, she croaks, pushing bundles into your hands, and whorehound for cough. You'll learn. You do. You learn how to bind wounds, how to poultice a fevered leg, how to mix valerian into mead to coax sleep from the most stubborn mind. You stir tinctures that turn your nails green and your fingertips numb. You learn to recognize which patients are pretending to be sicker than they are, just for an excuse to avoid field work. And then one day, a messenger arrives. Not for you, for the abbess. A rider in stained robes, soaked from the road, smelling of leather and urgency. His scroll is sealed with red wax, royal. The abbess reads it in the chapel. No one else is allowed in. Later, her face is pale, drawn. She gathers the senior sisters. Doors close. You, curious as always, try to pretend you're sweeping the corridor nearby. You catch fragments. Dissolution rumors. Lands absorbed. King's council in flux. You freeze. Swallow hard. Fringe tidbit. Before Henry VIII's infamous dissolution of the English monasteries, there were already whispers across Europe of religious institutions being evaluated, consolidated, or outright shut down by secular powers who saw more value in the land than the faith. The church wasn't immune to politics. It was politics. You don't know what's happening exactly, but change is coming, and change is dangerous. Later you overhear Sister Magdalena muttering, "They'll shut us down, mark me, sell the land. We'll be out begging like dogs." The abbess, overhearing, silences her with a stare so sharp it could cut bread, but the fear spreads. You can taste it in the refectory soup. You can hear it in the way the psalms are sung with extra devotion. You can see it in the way Beatrice clutches her rosary tighter at night. Historians still argue whether the nuns of smaller rural convents truly understood the broader church politics swirling around them, or if they were pawns swept aside by waves they couldn't see coming. Many simply disappeared from records, their names scratched out, their convents turned into farms or manor houses. One day, you sneak into the scriptorium. The place is barely used now, except for copying ledgers. But you find a corner scroll, tucked behind dust and spiders. It's your own name, written in an old register. You trace it with your finger. There you are. Once, someone thought you important enough to write down. Later, in the garden, Beatrice asks, "If we have to leave, where would we even go?" You don't have an answer, but you do have a plan. You begin teaching her everything Sister Agnes taught you. The tinctures, the tonics. You walk her through how to dry foxglove without killing anyone. You show her where the roots grow deepest in spring. Because if everything falls apart, if the walls crumble, if the land is taken, you want her to have more than prayers. You want her to survive. The next morning, something strange happens. The bishop sends a new scroll. He wants to visit again. No one is sure whether to celebrate or panic. You think of the way his rings flashed, the crumbs in the pew, the smug way he held the abbess's hand a little too long, and you realize this might be your last season here. So you start paying attention to things you'd once ignored, the way the sunlight hits the stained glass at Lauds, the creak of the north stair, the sweet, smoky smell of beeswax dripping from altar candles. You memorize it all, just in case. You wait to thunder, real thunder, low, rolling, ancient. It shakes the rafters and makes the dust in the corners dance. Rain lashes the convent roof like an angry drummer. You sit up in the dark, the wool blanket tangled around your legs, and listen. The storm is unusual. It's too early for summer's fury, too heavy for spring's gentle sobs. The air smells sharp, like wet stone and churned soil. Something about it makes your spine tingle. By morning, a tree has come down at the edge of the orchard. Its roots tore the ground open like a wound. You and the other nuns are sent to clear branches from the path to the main road. Beatrice tries to lift a log too big for her and nearly topples into the mud. You laugh, then help her. Then stop laughing altogether when you spot hoof prints in the softened earth. Not one set, 4, fresh. And then you hear the voices. The bishop has returned, but this time he's not alone. His retinue dismounts with military precision. There are no velvet sleeves this time, no fussy rings, just a small band of men in dark cloaks and heavy boots, and one pale notary holding a trembling quill. The abbess greets them, trying to keep her tone neutral. You can hear the tension in her voice from the vegetable patch. This isn't a visit. It's an audit. Mainstream historical fact. During the dissolution of monasteries under Henry VIII, inspectors known as visitors were sent out to assess religious houses. Often under the guise of rooting out corruption or immorality, their real job was to justify the seizure of lands and wealth. Some were thorough, some were brutal. Few were welcomed. The visitors fan out. One into the kitchens, one to the scriptorium, one to the dormitory, which you had no time to tidy. You catch him holding up a moth-eaten blanket with 2 fingers and a scowl. You feel shame flare in your cheeks, not because of the blanket, but because of the look on his face, like he's already made up his mind. Sister Helena mutters under her breath. Wolves in robes. You bite your tongue. The bishop stands in the chapel like a man inspecting livestock. He asks the abbess how many acres the convent owns, how many barrels of ale are produced each season, whether any property has been sold or leased in the last decade. His tone is smooth, but you've heard that kind of voice before. It's the tone of someone who smiles while emptying your purse. You linger by the apothecary, pretending to sort dried sage, but really just listening. The notary asks, "Are there any novices under the age of 15? The abbess hesitates, just for a breath. "Yes," she says. "1." Your heart slams against your ribs. Beatrice, fringe tidbit. It was common in the Middle Ages for noble or wealthy families to place young daughters into convents as child oblates. In some orders, girls as young as 5 or 6 were committed, often without their full understanding. Some flourished. Others felt imprisoned for life. They asked to see her. You nearly run, but stop yourself. You know better than to panic when men with scrolls are involved. You find Beatrice in the herb garden chewing a sprig of lemon balm. She's barefoot, mud up to her knees, humming to herself. Happy, innocent. You tell her to come. You say it gently. In the chapel, she stands in front of the bishop like a lamb before a blade. His questions are soft, rehearsed. Do you know your prayers? Yes, my lord. Do you wish to serve the Lord here always? There's a silence. She looks at you. You smile barely. She turns back and says, I do. Historians still argue whether young girls in medieval convents truly had agency in their decisions to take vows. While some records show passionate spiritual conviction, others read more like coerced obedience or social expectation. The line between calling and confinement was often blurry. The bishop smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. That's sweet, he says, but unnecessary. She'll be returned to her family by the month's end. This institution no longer meets the required standards for care and instruction. Your throat goes dry. The abbess, to her credit, doesn't flinch. Returned to which family? She asks coldly. Her parents died of fever last winter. She has no other kin. The bishop shrugs. Then she'll be placed elsewhere. Beatrice's face crumples, but no tears fall. She's too proud, too furious. You clench your hands into fists behind your back. You want to scream. You want to curse every kingdom and cleric and crowned fool who sees a girl as a number, a burden, a cost. That night, Beatrice doesn't speak. She just sits in bed, legs curled to her chest, rosary clutched like a weapon. The rain comes again. You sit with her until she sleeps. The next morning, things move fast. The visitors pack. The bishop signs something. The notary drops wax onto a seal so large it looks medieval, even by medieval standards. 2 sisters cry. One doesn't come to lauds at all. And you take something. A scroll. Just one. A record from the apothecary. You tuck it into your robes. You don't know why. Maybe you just want proof that you existed here, that you did something. The sun comes out. The birds return. The sheep bleat like nothing has changed. But you know better. You spend the afternoon showing Beatrice the plants one last time. This is feverfew. Remember, only for headaches, not for stomach. She nods. You show her how to dry calendula properly, how to peel yarrow root. You write her name on a linen scrap and tuck it into the old herb ledger. Because if they scatter you both like leaves in a storm, maybe someday someone will find her name again. The next week moves like honey, slow, thick, and cloying. It coats everything you do in a dull ache of waiting. The bishop and his grim notary are gone, but their shadow hangs heavy. You wake each morning wondering if today will be the day they return with soldiers, or scrolls, or both. No one says it aloud, but every sister knows the truth. The convent is marked. The abbess calls an emergency chapter meeting. You're summoned with the others after Vespers, into the drafty hall where important decisions are supposed to be made. Usually the air in this room is filled with polite silence and muffled sneezes. Not tonight. The abbess speaks with more fire than you've heard in years. She reads aloud the bishop's declaration. The convent will be reassessed in 6 months. If it fails to meet the requirements for economic viability and spiritual discipline, it will be dissolved. Everyone, nuns, novices, servants, dispersed. The land will be claimed by the church or crown. Mainstream historical fact. Between 1536 and 1541, under King Henry VIII, over 800 religious houses were forcibly closed in England during the dissolution of the monasteries. Thousands of monks and nuns were evicted. Many had nowhere to go. Others found refuge in larger religious houses, if they were lucky. The smaller the convent, the more vulnerable it was. You look around the room. Sister Helena's jaw is tight. Sister Agnes is shaking her head, whispering something about the end of days. Even the abbess's hands are trembling slightly. But oddly, you feel calm. Maybe it's the way the rain has stopped, or the fact that Beatrice still smiles when she spots a beetle in the path. Or maybe you're too tired to panic anymore. The abbess outlines your options. You can stay and try to reform, tighten your expenses, increase production, perhaps take in a few wealthy boarders. Or you can seek transfer to a more stable house. No one volunteers to leave. You stay. You all stay. In the weeks that follow, the convent shifts. It's like watching an old tree bracing for winter. You patch roofs, mend tunics, sell every extra blanket and book you can spare. The kitchen begins stretching meals thinner, porridge instead of stew, stale bread dipped in broth, fewer eggs. The sheep are bartered for firewood. Fringe tidbit. In times of economic distress, nuns often bartered or sold personal items to support their houses. Some even brewed ale or raised bees to sell honey. A few convents became known for their embroidery or herbal remedies, enterprising in their own way, even under threat. You notice something strange in the midst of all this, a sort of energy creeping in, an unlikely bloom of rebellion. Sister Helena begins teaching the novices how to write more quickly so they can copy texts for income. Sister Agnes reopens the shuttered candle shop. You help Beatrice gather herbs not just for medicine, but to flavor the bland broth and make the bread smell a little less like despair. Even the abbess starts walking differently, less like a figurehead, more like a woman prepared to throw a stone through a window. But for every step forward, a backward pull follows. You receive a letter, sealed in wax, from someone you barely remember. Your cousin's husband's brother, a parish priest in Kent. He's heard of your circumstances and offers you a place as a housekeeper. Should the convent fall, he adds. You fold the letter and put it in the fire. Historians still argue whether women in monastic life were truly better off than their secular counterparts. On paper, nuns had access to education, medical care, and spiritual purpose. But in practice, they also face confinement, poverty, and near total dependence on male clerical structures. Some women chose convent life. Others fled it when the walls crumbled. And slowly, walls do crumble. The mortar in the west cloister begins to crack. A shutter falls during a windstorm, smashing the scriptorium window. One of the elderly sisters collapses in the vegetable patch and doesn't rise again. You bury her under the apple tree. No feast day, just a whispered prayer. Beatrice asks, "Will I have to wear the habit when I'm taken?" You tell her maybe. You lie. She's begun sleeping near you, curled in a wool blanket like a cat. You teach her how to sharpen a quill, how to bandage a twisted ankle, how to dry chamomile on the windowsill. You leave notes in the garden for her, silly ones. Today, don't eat the mandrake, it bites back. She laughs, every time. But the abbess gets quieter. Her voice, once full of that sudden fire, now flickers low and dim. You find her late one night in the chapel, just staring at the altar. "They'll take it," she says. You nod. "They'll grind it to rubble and salt the earth." You nod again. She turns. "Will you stay if that happens?" You don't know what to say. You want to. But the truth is, you don't know where you go if this place disappears. You're not young enough to start over. Not rich enough to buy a position. Not bold enough to just walk into the world. So you lie again. "Yes," you whisper. There's a ritual the sisters begin, unofficially. Each night, someone leaves a candle lit in the north window, just until dawn. No one speaks of it, but it's become a kind of prayer, a hope flickering against the void. You take your turn. And in that flame, tiny and defiant, you feel something strange growing. Not dread, not even fear, just resolve. You wake before the bell. Something feels off. The air is thick, like the convent itself is holding its breath. Outside your cell window, the sky is bruised with that odd pre-dawn glow, part moonlight, part storm. The birds haven't started yet. Even they seem to sense that this day is different. You slip on your habit, finger the fraying sleeve, and move quietly through the hall. Most of the sisters are still asleep, curled beneath thin blankets, dreaming of quieter things. But not the abbess. She's already in the courtyard, standing like a statue in her wool cloak. She doesn't flinch when you approach. "They're coming," she says, not looking at you. Today. You feel it in your gut before you hear the hoofbeats. A slow, deliberate rhythm, hooves on gravel, not the rushed arrival of messengers, nor the panicked charge of soldiers. No, this is formal. This is final. Mainstream historical fact. When smaller religious houses were dissolved during the 16th century reforms, commissioners often arrived at dawn. Their purpose? Inventory everything of value, chalices, books, vestments, even livestock. Then, eviction. The nuns or monks had little legal recourse and were rarely given advance notice. The gate creaks open. 3 men ride in, draped in the church's dull red. No banners, no pity. One carries scrolls, one carries keys. The third is a scribe. You can tell by the ink stains on his cuffs. You want to run. You don't. By the time the other sisters gather, the commissioners have already claimed the chapel. Beatrice clings to your side. She's crying silently, her tears soaking through your sleeve. They begin reading, listing titles, rights, inventories, decrees. The abbess stands tall, voice flat, answering questions. She doesn't argue. She just notes which items belong to the convent, which to the crown, and which are personal property. You're told to pack. 2 trunks per person. Everything else becomes state property. You stare at your meager belongings, a wooden comb, your worn breviary, a tiny cloth doll Beatrice stitched you. It fits in your palm. You put it in your shoe. Fringe tidbit. There are accounts of nuns hiding small personal relics inside their sleeves or beneath floorboards, fragments of saints' bones, scraps of illuminated manuscripts, even pieces of stained glass. They believed these items carried memory, and in some ways, they did. The chapel doors are barred. No one cries out, but many weep. You find yourself in the scriptorium again, out of instinct, not reason. It still smells like wax and dust and lavender. Your quills are gone. The shelves are bare. One book remains, a psalter, forgotten, wedged between ledgers. You take it. You don't ask permission. Beatrice asks, "Where do we go?" You don't know. Some will go to nearby abbeys. If they're accepted, others will return to families that barely remember them. A few might find charity among the town's merchants. You think of that priest in Kent, his offer, the ash where his letter burned. Historians still argue whether the dissolution was a liberation or a devastation. Some claim the nuns were freed from cloistered prisons. Others argue they were cast adrift, stripped of safety, stability, and sacred calling. The truth is probably both, or neither, or somewhere uncomfortably in between. You find Sister Helena kneeling by the apple tree. She's digging. At first you think she's planting something. Then you see the sack. Inside, a crucifix, 2 silver spoons, and the convent seal. "They won't get it all," she mutters. You don't stop her. As the sun rises, You and the others form a slow procession out the main gate. The commissioners watch, disinterested. One writes your names, another counts the sheep you no longer own. Beatrice doesn't look back. You do. The roof is sagging, the bell is silent, and yet you swear, just for a second, you see someone still inside. A shadow in the chapel window, a flicker of candlelight. No, just your imagination. Maybe. The road stretches ahead, muddy, rutted, uncertain. You don't know how far you'll walk today, or where you'll sleep, or what tomorrow looks like. But you know this. You've survived, for now. And you still carry a psalter in your bag, and a cloth doll in your shoe, and a little girl's hand in yours. That counts for something. Your first night outside the convent is not gentle. You sleep beneath a hayloft, the straw scratchy, full of beetles, but strangely warmer than your old cot. The stars stare down without sympathy, and your bones ache from walking. Still, Beatrice snuggles into your side like a kitten, and you drape your cloak over both of you. It smells like old ink and lavender. You think of the bells, the routine, the rhythm. It's already slipping, like a tune you almost remember but can't hum anymore. When you wake, your mouth tastes of dust, and your feet feel swollen. There's no bell to wake you, no matins, no whispered chants, just birds, and the sound of a far-off cart. You walk for days, maybe weeks. The landscape changes, hill, marsh, hamlet, road. Time feels syrupy and strange. You measure your days not by prayers, but by loaves and fences, and whether or not it rains. People don't always welcome you. Some assume you're runaway wives or witches. Others eye the child with suspicion. Not yours, is she? Beatrice always grips your hand tighter. Still, there are pockets of kindness. A widow lets you sleep in her barn. A baker gives you a heel of rye bread that tastes like hope. An old monk nods when you pass him, whispering something in Latin. You only catch the end. Non omnis moriar. Not all mainstream historical fact. After the dissolution of nunneries in England under Henry VIII, most displaced women were given a small pension, if they were lucky. Many couldn't survive on it, and were forced into labor, marriage, or begging. A few became school teachers or midwives, adapting their monastic skills to a secular world that didn't quite understand them. You finally reach a town that feels less suspicious. A sleepy, fog-laced village nestled near a slow river. You hear church bells, but they're Anglican now. The Latin is gone. Still, the pews are wooden, and the roof doesn't leak. A woman named Agnes takes you in. She runs a small school, rough but earnest. She needs help. You don't say much, just that you once copied books, once taught children Latin, once knew how to stitch a garment with just 2 fingers and a candle stub. She says, "Then stay." You do. Fringe tidbit. Some ex-nuns in post-dissolution England carved out new identities as local herbalists, tutors, and even scribes for hire. While their religious vows were technically broken, their skills remained invaluable, especially in rural areas where literacy was rare. You begin to build a new rhythm. No bells, but habits nonetheless. You rise with the sun. You sweep, you teach, you make the alphabet into a game. You hum chants beneath your breath. The children listen with round eyes, especially when you mention the time you helped deliver piglets. Beatrice flourishes. She becomes the fastest reader in the village. You tell her stories from the Psalter at night, changing the names to protect your past. She doesn't know you were ever a nun. To her, you are simply you. Her you. And in quiet moments, when the world slows, you catch your breath and let your mind drift. You remember Helena's hidden sack, the abbess's stiff spine, the warmth of candlelight on stone. Historians still argue whether the fall of nunneries marked the death of women's autonomy or its rebirth. You can't quite decide. You were protected there, yes, but confined. You were silenced, yes, but also heard. Maybe freedom isn't so clear-cut after all. One evening, years later, you sit alone by the river. You're older now. There are lines around your eyes. You pull out the psalter. It's worn soft. The pages curl like petals. And you find a note. Tucked between Psalms 42 and 43, in a script you recognize instantly. Beatrice's. It reads, "I know you weren't just a teacher. You were something more. I love you." You smile. The wind rustles the reeds, and for just a moment in that gray-gold light you swear you hear it again. A bell. A soft, ghostly clang from a place that no longer stands, but still lives inside you. So now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the world beyond your blanket begins to blur, allow yourself to slip gently away from the muddy roads and smoky hearths of medieval life. Let the clatter of hooves and the rustle of linen fade into a soft, distant hush. The cold stone of the cloister, the flicker of candlelight, the whisper of parchment. They're all behind you now. You're safe. You're warm. And in this quiet moment, the story you've just traveled through gently folds itself up like an old psalter placed back on a shelf. The hardships, the rituals, the quiet moments of rebellion and resilience, they become threads in your dreamscape now, weaving into something soft and safe. Imagine Beatrice smiling. Imagine lavender blooming near the steps of a long-lost chapel. Imagine that flicker of bell sound, barely there, floating through a misty forest as you drift further and further into sleep. The world can be harsh, but here, in this moment, you can let it all go. You've walked enough roads. You've earned your rest. Good night.